promotion for all of the platforms. So today's session is going to continue, of course, our discussion on building resilience. This is Resilience University. So how are we going to successfully navigate the changes, the turbulence, the volatility to not just survive in our businesses, but really to thrive as business owners? I am very excited for the opportunity to talk to you all today about something that's super important. And it's interesting because at first I was like, well, do I want to, bring on somebody else to talk about this part? And I was like, I mean, I could, obviously, because I know some folks. But to be honest, I thought it was important for me to share kind of like my own experiences and what I'm seeing with my clients. But then also, I thought it would be cool to talk industry by industry. And I figured that I could just do that part myself. So, thank you all so much for joining us. If you're going to catch the replay, I'm excited for that too, because then you'll get a chance to do some pausing, do some analysis yourself, and actually apply it in real time. So, with that being said, excuse me, y'all know I love to have my notes. So, you're going to see me looking around. And then at a certain point, I'm probably going to end up grabbing some either screenshots or sharing a screen to talk about certain companies. So, with all of that being said, let's do this. So, what is first of all, when I was thinking about finance, I knew right away I wanted to talk about FP&A. And typically, especially if you are a micro business, meaning you're a solopreneur, you have a staff of maybe like less than 5 people, most of your financial activity is bookkeeping, perhaps tax planning, if you really, are savvy in the game. Or, at times you may do a little bit of forecasting, but usually it's very simple. Because my background falls so much under government or the public sector and large corporate work, FP&A was always at the center of conversation. So when people would be preparing annual budgets, strategic plans, I mean, this stuff will go on for months with making sure that all the numbers were right, that you had the appropriate forecast ready, that you did your ecosystem analysis and relationship analysis. So it was kind of second nature for me to think of that, particularly with my client work. But I realized I was like, yeah, but in my own business, I don't always do that because my business is small. And I realized that that was not unique, that most small businesses probably are not doing the level of detailed and sophisticated financial planning that is needed to thrive in extreme economic volatility that we are seeing now. Now, another thing to consider is that business and governments, really government operations, but businesses and government operations, they do not like volatility, especially large businesses. They have a huge budget, whether it's from labor and staffing to capital investments like buildings and warehouses and plants and all kinds of stuff. So they don't like disruption. They don't like anything happening, with major changes every 6 months, because they may have been planning for 5, 10 years to invest in a region or invest in a city or invest in a plant or invest in a new service or product. So I think it would be very helpful for us as small business owners to take that same approach. Not that we don't expect volatility and not that we aren't honest with ourselves that volatility will probably hit us harder than it would a large corporate, but from the standpoint that we plan our businesses to essentially be volatility proof or recession proof, right? It is very difficult. It can be extremely hard. Believe me, I know personally, but it is worth it. And even if you do experience extreme circumstances, when you institute some of the principles and activities that I'm going to talk about today, you will find that sometimes you can't help the final outcome, but you can help soften the landing and soften the blows. Okay. So, what is financial planning and analysis? Financial planning and analysis, I'm going to go to my notes, is a process of improving decision making through insights, relationship management, and budgeting. Okay, again, it's the process of improving decision making through insights, relationship management, and budgeting. And there are a series of activities that you will conduct through FP&A. There are even software and app platforms that give you the ability to integrate data seamlessly to do this. Usually, it is like what's called enterprise software, meaning it's for larger companies, but it's not impossible. And so I wanted to, kind of kick us off with thinking about number one, what's the difference between FP&A and just general finance activities? So I mentioned earlier that a lot of times as small business owners, our financial activity is bookkeeping, maybe some tax planning, and maybe just a little bit of budgeting, especially to make sure that we have cash flows to pay people, to keep our inventory where it needs to be in order to continue serving customers, but it's very small. So that oftentimes is what I would consider more like maintenance and upkeep. Taxes come around the same time every year. People got to get paid every week or every 2 weeks or every month. You know, things have to be sold or made or services have to be rendered every day or every week. So that is just basic maintenance. FP&A, on the other hand, is something that you are doing as a proactive measure and to be able to improve the long term viability and scalability of your company. So when you are doing FP&A activities, the difference is that you are assuming that all of your maintenance activities are already stabilized so that you can create a long-term vision, a long-term plan, a long-term strategy for the company. So it takes it to another level. Now, keep in mind, it it assumes that you've already done all of these other things. So if you don't have your bookkeeping in order, if you don't, have your payroll tight in terms of knowing how much you're paying people, how many people are on staff, and that's a real thing. Like sometimes you just get used to doing things. You got all type of stuff on auto pay, and you ain't paid no attention to what's coming out the account before you touch FP&A. You need to get that in order. And in fact, that's probably your most glaring threat to FP&A. So you want to handle those maintenance, day-to-day operational finance activities first. Because again, FP&A relies on insights, the management of your relationships, and budgeting. So if you don't know what's going out, what's coming in, what you're currently selling, what you currently offer, what are your strengths in the market, if you don't know those things, if you don't know what your tax burden may be, it's almost impossible to do FP&A because you have almost like a Swiss cheese effect of the insights that you need to make good decisions. So with that being said, there are five key areas that I've assessed with FP&A that I think will be very helpful for small businesses in particular to focus on. The first is internal financial history. So of course, I just mentioned the importance of just having your day-to-day operational finance activities needed to do bookkeeping, but you also want to see historical trends. And I would say, depending on how old your company is, obviously, if you've been in business less than a year, then you just go back as many quarters as you can. But in my case, like my business is almost 10 years old. So I can look at historical data at least 5 years, right, to see, okay, well, what has my business been doing? What has worked and what has not worked? So in my case, and keep in mind, this is as a service-based business that is 100% service-based for the most part until recently. And so if you are a product-based business, just, eat the meat, spit out the bones. But as a service-based business, I can look and see, you know what? I was investing a lot of money into labor. Okay. What did those, inputs produce? Well, not that much. Okay. So when I lay people off, did I feel like that improved the company's operations? In what way? Did it make us more efficient? Did it boost our brand? Did it improve morale for any remaining team members, etc.? You also want to look at with the financial history, lines of credit worthiness, credit partners. Did you have any lines of credit, any business loans? What was happening with your bank accounts? What are those banking relationships like? And again, those pieces of history will help you see who was involved in decision making, how impactful was their involvement, and was that impact net positive or net negative? because everything isn't going to be perfect. So sometimes you might have some flubs, you might have some incidents where you like, what the heck? But overall, did that person improve the state of the company, or did they take away from the company's productivity? Did it take away from the company's performance? And so those are all really important factors to consider, because a lot of companies, to be honest, are considering layoffs or have laid off. And sometimes, especially on the labor side, where you might be considering sunsetting products, you might be considering changing suppliers. Line items aren't just line items. Line items on a budget represent impact, clarity, quality of relationship building. They represent stability. They represent innovation. And if you're not willing to look at the narrative behind the line item, you could cut all you want. You're going to end up having to revise some of those cuts. And sometimes some relationships, some connections, some decisions are not solvable or not fixable. So, again, number one, internal financial history. Number two, leadership's strategic vision. Now, this at the highest level, I would say one consideration would be, are you planning an exit? So if you know that you actually want to close your company like in the next 2 years, that is going to be the guiding force behind many of the decisions that you're going to make. If you know that you want to expand locations, so let's say you have two locations, and just economically the cities where those locations are postured, you might say, we actually want to go touch this other region. So if the strategic vision is to either completely move operations or expand operations into different regions of the country or the world, that is the guiding principle behind the FP&A activities that you're going to conduct in this round. Strategic vision also deals with, if you're changing, for example, your compensation philosophy or your talent philosophy. So if you are looking to update your talent philosophy, and perhaps you want to do way more investing in learning and development for your staff, you want to increase the investment that you make in staff to have different certifications because the industry is changing. You want to invest more in tuition reimbursement, right? So you see what's happening as far as changes in student loan servicing. So you said, you know what, it's important for us to have a highly educated or well-trained workforce. So we're going to start paying for that. That change in talent and compensation philosophy will signal a lot of the changes that you'll probably need to make through FP&A. And so when you're thinking about that strategic vision, the strategic vision is dependent upon what does success look like in the next phase of this company. Again, success could be an exit, it could be relocation, it could be downsizing, it could be hyper growth, it could be just holding the line. So you might say, you know what, there are so many changes happening right now. Success looks like we don't have to lay anybody off or let anybody go, and we just maintain our same revenues. That is a worthy goal. Let me actually pause and say that. That is a worthy goal. The goal doesn't always have to be extreme growth. Sometimes it is enough to just stay open, right? And I think the last like 20 years of business has hyper fixated on tech startups, especially in the social media realm, that we expect that every company should grow like that every company should exist like that, and that's just not true. Most of the time in small, especially in small businesses that have brick and mortar presence, it is more than enough to just stay open. Like if you able to keep the lights on and keep people employed that work for you, you're doing good, because that any economic volatility, especially at the brick and mortar level, has an outsized impact on communities. So a good example would be, I'm thinking back to, it was that Michael Moore movie about the GM plant in Flint. I can't believe I can't remember the name because it was like all the rage when I was younger. But when you have a single source economy, that one thing closing will decimate a whole area. a whole neighborhood, a whole city, a whole county, sometimes a whole state. So, again, y'all know I'm a Detroiter. So, taking Michigan as an example, when the auto industry sneezes, it's like Michigan is having a severe case of the flu because so much of the state's economy is dependent on the auto industry. It is dependent on not just the big three, but also the suppliers, tier one, tier two, all the way down to tier five. It is dependent upon all the restaurants that provide lunch and breakfast to the employees that come to the plants. It is dependent upon all the people who make signs to provide signage for things, the event staff to cater to galas and corporate lunches and stuff. It's a whole system around that. So when you lose that one thing, yeah, it can be debilitating. So again, do not diminish the importance of just keeping the lights on. If you managing to keep your lights on over the past, 18 months especially, yeah, you're doing real good because everybody ain't able. Okay. And so, like I said, you don't have to pursue, oh, if we don't double our revenue in the next year. So you might say, look, we ain't have to lay nobody off. We doing good. Everybody that work here is still able to pay their bills. I think we in a good spot. Okay. So number three, internal operational analysis. So strictly looking at inside the company's operations. We're not looking at external stakeholders yet. What does that look like from a financial perspective? How much waste is occurring? I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt, so my my mind goes to waste and efficiency right away. But how much time does it take for us to produce things? Have we gotten faster, slower, or kept the same pace? Have we had workplace injuries? If so, is it due to faulty equipment? Are there new equipment new pieces of equipment, excuse me, that employees have asked about? What is new on the market, for example, that we've heard about but couldn't make the investment yet, right? What is happening internally in terms of morale? Do people feel like their work still matters? Do people feel like they're still being productive? Have we had issues with attrition? If so, why? Is it because, maybe people are quitting because they say the workplace is unsafe? Maybe they're quitting because they feel like management isn't hearing them. Are they quitting because there are too many managers? Like all of that is a part of an operational analysis too, whether you're a product or a service-based business. So that's a really important piece because again, a lot of times, especially as small business owners, our first thought is either layoffs or terminations, or I'm gonna cut external vendors. But if you don't have a good grip of your internal workflows, operational processes, you either might be cutting the wrong thing or just cutting unnecessarily. Like sometimes you can rework and renegotiate relationships. And this is even true for things like technology subscriptions. Like I've been getting a bunch of little emails from these companies. It's like, oh, okay, girl, we gonna give you such and such months free. Or oh girl, we see, of course, y'all know they're not saying girl, but but it'll be like, hey, we see you've been with us for 3 years. We're going to give you a 20% discount for the next 3 months because maybe the payment was late a couple times. So they peep game, they know what time it is. And sometimes it's easier to stay as a retained customer at a discount than it is to pursue new client acquisition and then hope that they stay. And these companies recognize that, especially for the tech subscriptions. This is also true because, so we still talk about renegotiation. A lot of companies have gotten excited over the years about enterprise accounts. So if I can get, the Fortune 500 to buy into our subscriptions and pay these huge prices, I love that. But number one, like the big tech companies, so Google and Microsoft in particular are two that come to mind. SAP, ADP, they have done a lot of work in innovation, like Workday, things like that. And so sometimes the smaller services that had just like one offering or two features that they offered or two functions, they have now been cut by enterprise accounts because those features or add-ons are now integrated into the larger services. So these companies are now trying to go after smaller businesses because 9 times out of 10 you can't afford to pay the huge astronomical prices for enterprise accounts with like a Google or Microsoft. In some cases, not always, but sometimes it's easier for them to pursue you because if you need something, you're gonna stick with that company because you know them. It's easy. You could focus on your business. So again, that renegotiation can be very helpful for you. Book a call with somebody. And if you don't have an account executive that you work with, I will go right to the website, click support, hop on chat and be like, what's up? So again, you don't always have to cut. You don't always have to sever relationships. You can renegotiate to improve internal operations. Number four, external operations relationships, aka your ecosystem or your external ecosystem. So this is when you start thinking about vendors, partners, how viable is it? Let me say this about cutting folks because I've had I done had to make this decision. Some things you just need to just do. Like, yeah, it costs some money. Sometimes it don't always even produce the ROI, but it's like you just need it. And it's important in FP&A to do that external operations relationship analysis because if you don't assess the second, third, fourth, and even fifth degree consequences of severing a relationship, you could end up destroying your long term vision. And that's what you don't want. So, yes, you're going through a rough financial period. Yeah, you probably, would benefit from being able to cut this thing that costs $100 a month or $200 a month. But maybe that's a relationship that you won't have the opportunity to reconnect later when you get into a bag. Or it could be that the second and third degree relationships that you got from that relationship relies on you staying connected there. And so again, you got to be mindful. Every cut is not a paper cut. Some cuts are like an amputation, and you ain't mean to go that far, and you ain't mean to cut that deep. And we're seeing that. I ain't gonna get it in there. We seeing that a lot where people think, okay, I'm gonna just make this one cut because that's gonna solve. You doing more damage than you intend, and you need to be very mindful of that. I'm gonna move on to the next point. So finally, now we get into market analysis. And that usually is like the first place people want to go to. In FP&A, it's like, well, what is the market doing? I cannot tell y'all how many of my small business and startup clients I have to like shake real hard and be like, stop paying attention to what other people are doing. Let me tell y'all something. There is a lane for everything. There's a lane for everything. There are businesses where people get paid to cuddle with folks and they make it pretty good money, like livable wage. There are businesses where people get paid just to make phone calls with people. There are products for like it's funny, I was looking at my phone like the pop it, like the thing that you have on the little background to hold your phone. Them things cost about $1 or something like that, but somebody get in the bag because they made one with sparkles, then they made one that looks like there's a market for everything. And so before you run and rush to be like, oh, let me see what other people doing, take a pause and think about, why did I get into this? Why was I passionate about starting this business? What value is there in what I'm currently doing, what I have done? And then let me see if I want to move on to do something different. You don't always you don't always have to pay attention to what other people are doing. I tell folks all the time, I can't tell you who my competitors are. Like, and that might be bad, but I don't know because I ain't paying no attention to them. And in my head, I'm like, oh, my competitors are like big four consulting. Like, to me, my competitors are the McKinsey's of the world, the Boston Consulting Groups of the world. And I'll never forget, I was in this I was in this learning session. It was like a business development program, and I said that, and the facilitator like cracked up, like she thought that was so funny, and she was like, "No, they not. Like, please, you're not that." And I laughed too because I'm like, "Oh, she don't know me." I thought it was funny too. And so later, I think within a year, I was going for some contract. I was doing something, and the uh person I was talking to sell to, they were like, "Yeah, we were thinking of going to McKinsey for this, but we want to work with you because it's like we get that white glove touch, and I feel like you just understand us." And all I could do was smile because I saw the vision, right, of like where my company needed to go and what I knew it could be. And regardless of what other people saw or what people expect me to be because of my company size, or even because of my race and my gender, even because of my company's age, I didn't care. I see and I saw what it was, period. And that was what I saw was realer to me than what I saw. That makes sense. So what I saw here was realer to me than what I saw here that existed right now. And you got to have that same mindset. I knew I'm not competing with the big four consultant because I want to turn into this huge, huge consultant agency with a. No, I knew I could compete because of the innovation, because of the quality of service, because I don't worked with people who worked for them, and I know what I've produced. I know it. And when you have that confidence, you could compete against anybody. You compete against anybody. And you can compete against anybody, including the old version of yourself. Because sometimes, especially as small business owners, we get hung up on the fact of how great we were 5 years ago. And I'm guilty of this too. Because I had to check myself recently on that, where I was like, man, I was doing this for you. It's like, girl, that was a whole different world then. Like, what you on right now? And if we get so caught up on the glory of our past success, we miss the little nuggets of opportunity that are presenting themselves in the current moment. Reliving and staying stagnant in past success is just as detrimental as not moving at all. Because, as I always explain to people, the world is constantly moving forward. Things are changing every day. There are billions of people living on this earth, and we are all evolving in our own ways as smaller pods and groups of people. So, if even if you're just staying still, right? If this is you in the world, so you neck and neck at one point. If the world is moving forward and you just stand still, guess what? You still behind. Because not a world is over here. You right here. You didn't have to go further back. You all you had to do was stay still to be behind. So the key here is to evolve past your best success. I have had some incredible wins in my company. And the key word is had. And I'm proud of those wins. I'm excited about what those wins did for me, but there are more wins to be accomplished. It's funny, I'm gonna say this and then I'm gonna move on to the next point. I was looking for something yesterday because I needed a document to send to someone, and I needed it from my personal email, one of my personal emails, and I ended up stumbling upon the email from when I did study abroad almost 20 years ago in South Africa. And because of how the program was run, we would email our assignments to the South African professor that was assigned to our study abroad group. And I remember sending her, of course, the papers, and then she would respond back with feedback and our grade. But I remember sending her my final paper. And I sent a draft because, like, let's say the paper was due like on a Thursday. I sent her my draft by like Monday for her to review, give major feedback. It's similar to how you would do like a thesis or a capstone paper or a dissertation where you get feedback, you get a chance to fix it, submit it again, and then you get your final grade. But she liked my draft so much, she was like, nope, this is finished. Like, I'm taking this as your final paper. this even made me think and reconsider some things. You get an A plus. And I remember that whole study abroad experience, it wasn't my first, but that one in particular was impactful for a number of reasons. I was a senior, graduating and thinking about where my life will go next. And then there were like religious overtones to my research too. And it was just super fascinating. And I remember when I submitted the paper, I was like, okay, now I could just take a breather for the night. And she sent it back like quick. Like I remember she sent it back. I don't even think it was the next day. And to see her feedback on something that felt so deeply personal to me that I took a risk to write. Cause again, since it had the religious overtones, everybody was like, why are you writing about that? You need to do something different. But I felt in my heart I needed to do that. And so to get such glowing reviews and feedback on that, it just did something for me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like because I was graduating, that was like my first adult win, right? Because actually I went to study abroad the months, like the summer after graduation. So I graduated in April, but we had to take a class to go to this like that summer. So I was technically done with school. And I just remember feeling like, oh my God, like I followed my intuition, I followed my passion, and it did what I needed it to do. Like this wasn't a prescribed path that somebody else had laid out for me. So I find this email yesterday and I just started crying. And it brought back such a rush of pride and gratitude. But what it did for me was to say, if 22-year-old Kaylin could follow her intuition and through adversity, naysayers, detractors, and to be clear, I mean, they weren't doing it like maliciously. They was just like, girl, you need to pick something more realistic for your research so you can find sources, blah, blah, blah. So it was well-meaning advice, but I still followed my gut. I followed what I wanted to do, and I got the desired outcome. Like I got better than what I thought I would do. And if I could do that then, what am I cooking up now that I need to have that same level of passion and self belief? And the same thing goes for you. Like, as great as your last win is, that's cool. Review it, archive it somewhere, memorialize it. And then now, what you going to do now? Because again, if 22-year-old Kaylin could do that, I know 40-year-old Kaylin with all of this experience and all these things, I know she could make something shake. And that was the conversation with myself, which leads me to my next point. Assess your current state before considering entering new markets. Because what I told myself yesterday when I saw this email was, girl, you always been betting on yourself, right? Like you always been willing to take risks and, invest in new things because you knew that you had some foundational nuggets that would carry you through to a good outcome. So I knew even back then, because I was willing to listen actively to people, because I was willing to include folks, because I was willing to read and learn, because I was willing to be humble enough to let other people own their story, because I was disciplined enough to sit and ground myself in unfamiliar things to get familiar and learn. Because I could do all those things, I knew I could finish that research project, and I did. That part of me hasn't changed, right? And so when you're assessing your current state, yeah, look at the numbers, right? Are you cash positive, cash negative? Yeah, look at the numbers. Do you have the raw inputs to produce your products? Yeah, look at the numbers. Are the tariffs higher? So it costs more to produce. Yes, do all of that. That's cool. But also, right? What is your je ne sais quoi? What are your strengths? What is your thing that like you got that you can use to push through? Are you an innovator? Are you highly disciplined? Do you have a team that's like grinders and they like, look, we don't care what's going on. We'll sit here for 16 hours to get this done because we're not losing a single team member. Like, what do you have that's your thing that is going to push you? Start from there. That's a part of the current state. Because when you know that, then you know Okay, now we can effectively make a plan. So again, for me, I knew even back then I had the gift for building mutually beneficial relationships. That when people sat down with me, they felt like that they would be heard. They felt like I genuinely cared about what they had to say, and they knew that I would honor their story. And I still use that same principle right now. So when I'm doing these sales calls, when I'm going to into international markets, right, to look for new partners, guess what? I use that same version of Kaylin that at 22 traveled all the way across the world to do this research project. That same Kaylin is still at play, and that's how I'm making it happen. Now, if you are somebody who has a staff and a team, what are the strengths for each team member? Maybe you got somebody, they not super innovative, they not the ideas person, but guess what? They a finisher. They don't care how long it take. They don't care how long they have to sit and learn something to get something done, but they gonna get something done. And guess what? That finisher, they gonna carry you through. Maybe you got the person where they not good with technology, they horrible at meeting deadlines, but you know what? When you need somebody to make a connection and negotiate, oh my gosh, that's your person. And guess what? You're gonna need them at the table when you're doing sales pitches. You're gonna need them as you move folks through your sales funnel, your marketing funnel. And again, it's not that you keep dead weight around, but I will say it's not as black and white as we make it seem. And this is something that I have to constantly learn. So I have a client that's actually really good at that. And he is like constantly pushing me to be like, nope, this is the aspect of this person or this service or this offering that I like and I want to keep it. I get what you're saying. That's cool. But no, because I see value in this. And I'm like, I don't see it. But he get it, he rocking, and it's his company. So it's like, hey, I have advised you, but I get where you coming from. And through working with him, I'm seeing where it's like, oh, okay, I need to be like a little more nuanced in my approach. And let me also say that assess the current state of your customer, your client base. So clients and customers teach you a lot if you let them, right? Like I learned a lot from I learned so much from my customers. I love everybody who I work with, like genuinely. I'm grateful that I get to pick the people I work with and they're not just inherited or forced upon me. I love the people I work with. They teach me stuff all the time. And just recently, y'all know I'm finishing school. Part of my FP&A is like, I need to get out of school. Like, I need to finish this degree fast because it takes a whole different part of my brain to get in academic mode. It is a lot of work, right? It is cost prohibitive, right? Like, because it costs money to go to school for me. And I'm like, I got to get out of school. Well, I'm in data collection phase and I hit a roadblock with getting people to respond. And then it clicked. I'm like, why don't I just ask my clients again? Like, just send an email and be like, hey, y'all know some people that meet this criteria. I sent that out. I've done it twice. I did it once months ago, maybe like January or February. And then I did it recently, like in the last week. Every time I done got a whole block of people. Now, this week, I will do my last interview for data collection and I'll be done and be able to just work at my own pace with finishing writing so I could defend my dissertation and get on up out of there. That is a benefit too. Cause I already know everybody can't call on somebody and be like, hey, can you tap into your personal network to have this person sit with me for a recorded interview to talk about their personal experiences? Everybody can't do that. And so that is a testament too to the benefits that you bring. In some cases, you might be able to tap into your client base and be like, hey, look, I'm not asking you to sign off on a contract to buy this. Can you do me a favor and just like sit on this free webinar and hear me out about what I'm building and give me feedback? Do you know how invaluable that is? Right. And that's how you nurture relationships. One question that I always ask when I'm analyzing relationships is, how can I support you? And then actually respond, right? And so when you're thinking about and analyzing your current state, yes, look at what you need, but also ask, Where are there places where I can support other people in my ecosystem that I haven't shown up yet or in a while? So it could be like, take major holidays. It was Mother's Day, it was Father's Day. Do you reach out and tell me, hey, happy Mother's Day, happy Father's Day? Right, back to school coming up. You know, people who kids coming to school, you might have some extra inventory of book bags or pencils or something. Hey, look, I know the kids going back to school. Can I send you a little goodie bag for them? That'll, take a chunk out of the back to school budget. Anything, right? There are ways you could show up for folks. And so part of that analysis is looking at, where can I serve and give right now in order to strengthen, or at the very least maintain, my relationships to get me to the next place. Do that first before you think about, oh, I'm gonna go take over this market. That might not be the move. I just had a conversation with somebody that I'm looking to partner with on something, and they were like, well, why you be taking on like these small contracts to do this and that? And I told them, I said, I do that because, number one, I recognize that for that particular service, opportunities to do that work don't always come around, right? And that particular market is heavily saturated. So even if I get a chance to do a little small contract, that keeps the business flowing for that, so that I can prove past performance continuously. So at least once a year, I try to offer, I try to get a paid engagement or contract for every service I offer, at least once a year. The second part to that is I submit RFPs for things. So it could be training contracts, contracts to work with corporates or whatever. And one of the first questions they always ask is talk about past performance. So, where in the last year or 3 years have you provided similar services and at the rate that you're trying to charge us? So, I was explaining to this person, I'm like, if I have large gaps where I'm not offering these services, then I knock myself out of even being able to submit for an RFP, let alone win it. And I decrease my asking power, right? My selling power financially, because I ain't offered a blah 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 coaching service in 7 years or whatever. So if they willing to pay me at least my base rate, even if it's for a small engagement, I'm with it, because then that keeps that system running on paper for when I'm trying to go for other things. And it's the same thing for you. If you got a product based business, hey, maybe you're not buying or investing with your suppliers at the same volume you were, but you at least get small batches, right? You get a small batch so that you can invest in saying, hey, look, I'm still rocking with y'all. I'm still with y'all. We still building this relationship. Offer to help them test things out, or, share, even sharing social posts. Let me also say that sometimes when you're not buying from people, social engagement helps a lot. I don't always get the chance to work with companies, but if I see somebody, they post a role that they're hiring for on their team, especially for my corporate and government clients, I share it. I'd had people I worked with before or done things before. Unfortunately, maybe they were a part of layoffs. They post up, hey, y'all, I'm open to work, looking for a role. I'll go on and share, hey, so and so's great, right? Write people recommendations on LinkedIn. Again, there are all types of investments you can make into your current relationships that are a part of benefiting your current state before you go talk about creating something totally new from scratch. So sometimes it's better to nurture existing things than it is to try to start new things. Okay. And so the last thing I want to bring up is considering certain top metrics, right? So one of the first is labor cost, and that includes owner's draw. So has your budget changed such that you need to pay yourself differently in your business? If that's the case, you need to think about that, right? Do you need to start cutting yourself a paycheck so you can pay in the taxes instead of just doing the draw? And maybe that'll help your tax burden. Do you have too many people on staff? Do you have too many people on staff in a particular department? Do you have too many people on staff that are being paid at a certain rate? Do you need to take people from full time to part time or part time to full time in order to navigate the volatility? Those labor costs are going to be super important. Also, you might want to consider, do you want to switch people between 1099 and W 2? So maybe you got a bunch of W 2 employees, Do you want to switch people to 1099 or vice versa? You might have people as independent contractors, and for you, it's more cost effective to switch people to W 2 employees. That's a conversation you probably gonna want to have with your accountant and your finance professional, and then with the team. Hey, this is what I'm considering. What do y'all think? Right? The second metric, your tech stack. So, what subscriptions and services are you paying for? It is so easy. It's so easy to let those things slide, and you will be paying crazy money for stuff that you don't even need and can't use. Right. And so, you want to look at how much am I paying for stuff and is it worth it? Because you might find that you are either duplicating costs, um, or sometimes you got gaps in things and you really need to invest in new tech. In my case, it was I was paying for too much stuff and I needed to cut it. So I think this was December. Yeah, it was December because I told myself I'm like I ain't going into 2025 paying all this money. And I have had Google Workspace for like years. Like I think I always had Google Workspace for my company's email. Google done got like a new Holy Ghost. Like Google on some different time because they started innovating like crazy. And a lot of the additional services that I was paying for at separate costs, Workspace be offering. I took my budget, my tech budget from like 3,000 a year down to like 1,200 overnight because I just switched over to just using Google for stuff. Now, on one hand, you might say, yeah, but like if something happened with them that you messed up. Yeah, that's true. And then I would have to add on them other things again. But for right now, that ain't working for me. And that matters. So again, think about your tech stack. Also think about do you have too many licenses? So I had a client, they had different email addresses for things, but they didn't need user seats. So it's like, yeah, you need that as an alias because you need folks to be able to reach out to a different email address, but you don't need a whole seat with all of them other things. Like this about to say you like $100. So we sat down, put together a plan, and was like, okay, how can we move this around? Is it even important to have this as an email alias? What was that doing before? Is that necessary now? So again, a huge part of FP&A is looking at how is the tech helping us to achieve that strategic vision? That's the thing. If the technology is not actively helping, it's probably hurting, right? Because again, the goal is to not just boost efficiency and minimize waste, but it is also to make sure that we can get there with the softest landing possible. And in some cases, maybe you don't want to completely stop that technology relationship because some things you get grandfathered in on. I ain't even gonna say what it is, but I got something where it was like a one-time cost that you paid that was kind of high then, but I had the money paid for it, and so it's like a lifetime subscription. I don't never use that, but I will never give it up because I don't know, I might need it later. You know what I'm saying? And so you probably going to have things like that too, like stuff where you just get grandfathered in on some amazing price. You might not want to let that go. I'm thinking of phone plans too. You might have a sick phone plan and you like skirt. I'm gonna keep that. See if you can either pause, maybe downgrade some of the features, but you don't want to let go of being subscribed because the re-entry cost might be way too high. All right. And finally, COGS or cost of goods sold. COGS is important because, of course, your input cost might have just like completely just like exploded over the past 6 months. And in addition to looking for new suppliers and manufacturers for things, if you're a product based business, it also might be costly to even sunset something. So if you think of phasing something out, what are the costs of getting rid of the leftover, inputs and ingredients or pieces? What is the cost of, I'm sorry, what's the cost of, maybe closing a storage unit or a warehouse, right? It costs money even to quit. Like quitting costs money. And then another part of that COGS, even though technically it's a different line item, but what are the brand position and brand reputation hits that you'll take from sunsetting something or fundamentally changing an offering. So, we talk all the time about like fast food restaurants. It's funny because McDonald's just brought back snap wraps. And it's like, yeah, but why y'all take them away? Like KFC with the potato wedges, where it's like, dude, like, there's no reason for this. Why are you taking this thing off the menu? Or why is this option not available anymore? And this even applies to levels. So if you're a SaaS company or if you offer services, let's say you had certain features at the free level and now you make it paid, people might be like, bump that. Y'all gouging for money, right? You might go viral on social media. It could be bad. So when you're thinking about cost of goods sold, yeah, like again, like I was saying at the beginning, just measure line items. That's cool, but you also want to look at what's the impact of making any type of substantive change to the production process, because it's not just dollars and cents. So that being said, that's what I got today for FP&A. We gonna make it through this. I'm pretty sure I said it last week. I'm gonna say it next week, and in all of these sessions, we gonna make it through this. But we do have to do some forecasting, and we have to look at what we have going on currently, do our own internal SWOT analysis, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and see where we need to nurture relationships, where do we need to make cuts, and where do we need to make stronger investments to get that strategic vision realized. That's the whole goal. Because I don't want us to just make it through. I want us to thrive. And that is possible, even in all of this chaos. All right. So, of course, I hope that you join me for next week's session. We're going to be continuing our conversation, talk about some good stuff. I'm enjoying these conversations. If you have questions, be sure to drop it in the chat. Or you can feel free to message me on LinkedIn or any other social platform. My DMs are always open. And I'm looking forward to seeing y'all in the next one. All right. Catch y'all later. Bye.